Ruta Sepetys is an internationally acclaimed #1 New York Times bestselling author of historical fiction published in over 60 countries and 40 languages. Ruta is considered a crossover novelist as her books are read by both students and adults worldwide. Winner of the Carnegie Medal, Ruta is renowned for giving voice to underrepresented history and those who experienced it. Her books have won or been shortlisted for over 40 book prizes and are included on over 30 state reading lists and are currently in development for film and television. We are super excited to have Ruta Sepetys here with us for the James River Writers special interview series. We're going to get right into it right after this.
Welcome to the James River Writers Podcast, where we interview writers, agents, editors, and others from the industry to learn their perspectives on the world of writing and publishing. Our goal is to build community by connecting and inspiring writers. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
All right, welcome to everyone that is joining us here for the James River Writers JRW Talks podcast live stream series. We see you coming on in. We invite you to comment, to share. And I'm your lovely host, Charvette Mitchell. I'm super excited to be back with you again for this interview series. So listen, let's get right on into it. My guest is hanging out right in the virtual studio, coming up to the mic. Ruta, welcome to the show.
Hi, Charvette. Thank you so much for having me.
We are so excited to see your lovely, beautiful face, and it is such an honor. So let's just go back in time. When did you fall in love with writing and with books?
Oh, way back in time. I'm not going to say how many years because I'll date myself, but when I was 9 years old, I read a book called James and the Giant Peach. I have it on my bookshelf right behind me, about a little boy, James Henry Trotter. And Charvette, reading that book made the world less lonely for me. And I realized at that moment the power that stories have. And also Roald Dahl, the author, was a bit, like whimsical and eccentric. And I loved it. And I thought, this is what I want to do. I wrote my first book at 9 years old, and adults didn't appreciate it. They thought my stories were inappropriate. So it stole my courage. So I fell in love with it very early on. But, because that courage was stolen, it took me a much longer time to come back to it.
Wow. And so when did you actually say, okay, I am really going to do this? And of course, you don't have to share ages or anything, but what was the catalyst that said, okay, no, this is my career?
I'm so glad that you asked this question, because many people, one of the myths about writing is that, you have to start young. That's not the case at all. I worked for 22 years in the music business prior to becoming an author. I was helping artists and songwriters and film composers tell stories through music. And one day, one of them asked me, they said, well, come on, Ruta, what's your story? And they turned the tables on me, and I had to confess to myself that I really still dreamed of telling my own stories. And so it was in my 30s. It was in my 30s that I came back to it and said that I was going to try again in earnest.
Wow. So I put together book collaborations, and my second book collaboration, one of my authors is a comedian. And so you might think, we got business owners, comedians. Let me tell you, her chapter was one, the editor went through it. Her chapter was was one of the best chapters, and was the first chapter, because as a comedian, you write, as an entertainer, you write. And so I think that's such a beautiful transition. So New York Times bestseller, so I know there were journeys, leading up to that. But that is the coveted space and the coveted place that authors and writers want to be. What was it like when you made it to that accomplishment?
It was unreal. It was surreal, because, for the audience, let's give some perspective and context. I write books about communism and fascism. Not exactly your most commercial fare. But as we're going to talk about at the James River Writers Conference, we're going to talk about characters and world building. And at the heart of all that is connection and empathy and human resilience. And so even though these to hit the New York Times bestseller list with a book on, communism or fascism was kind of surreal. At its heart, the themes were very universal, I think.
Yeah. And so did you ever have any regrets or anything that drew you back to say, maybe I shouldn't write about these type of topics?
Oh, of course. Regrets, failures, they're all a prerequisite to success, I think. There were some unexpected turns. First of all, let's talk about some failures or regrets.
Yeah.
I'm writing about time periods that I didn't experience because I write historical fiction. And what right do we have to history other than our own? So I take it very seriously about my research. I spend years and years researching, but you can't always get it right. And there are some times where I had an incorrect date in the book, and it was a reader who corrected me. And fortunately, my publisher allowed us to change it in a subsequent printing. But I see that as an opportunity. This is a creative partnership with readers. I was in a creative partnership with Roald Dahl when I was a little girl reading that book. And now I have the privilege of being in a creative partnership with readers and workshop attendees. And maybe people think a published writer can be a mentor, but I see it differently. There can be reverse mentorships. You and I, the people that you're consulting with, Sharvette, and that you're building platforms for, you probably learn just as much from them as they do from you. And it's the same for me as a writer. So yes, I'm but learning.
Absolutely. I love that thought process. I say we're all leaders, and, perhaps my specialty area, I'm a trusted guide, but your area as a therapist or as an accountant or what have you, you specialize in that area. And I love the thought of the partnership with the reader and not feeling, I feel like there are some authors who are like, I don't want to put it out because I will get bad reviews. And what if people don't like it? What do you say to that author who has that fear?
Oh my goodness. Well, first of all, working for 22 years in the music business, which, let me tell you, to develop a thick skin, I not only received bad reviews, but rude comments. And I literally at one meeting had a record company executive tell me, I like doing business with you, but I just don't like your face. Oh my goodness. What do you do with that kind of feedback? You learn from it. You allow it to make you stronger. And I do think that there's always something that we can learn from negative feedback or a critique. And sometimes it does take perspective. So what I tell people to do is try to take a breath and go from reaction to reflection. If we're reacting, it's very emotional. It's our egoic self or our vulnerable self that's reacting. But if we go to reflection, could we look at it from the outside in instead of the inside out and say, what are they really telling me here? And what do I take away from this?
Wow. And it's not what happens to us, it's really our response to what happens to us. So we are certainly excited to have you at the 19th annual James River Writers Conference. And those that are watching and listening and viewing, we have the information right here on the screen. You can screenshot it. You're on the page where you can go and register if you haven't registered. Thank you so much. We have a viewer that is chiming on in here. Thank you, Melissa. Reaction to reflection. Great advice. Thank you for being here with us live. Absolutely. And so you're going to be sharing, and you gave me a few nuggets. What else would you kind of give us a little hint of what you'll be sharing during the conference?
Sure. And first, I have to say, I have wanted to take part in the James River Writers Conference for years. Authors, we see these conferences, and it's been one that I've always really dreamed of taking part in. And Meg Medina referred me, so shout out to Meg for recommending me. I'm going to be on 2 panels on Saturday, October 9th. One will be on building characters, and one will be on building inclusive and authentic worlds. And because I write historical fiction, there's, I guess, certain parameters that go into, building a setting that is historical. I'm also going to be touching upon, some myths. Of this baggage that we kind of bring with us into our writing, even when it's building characters, thinking, I can't do that, or I maybe couldn't describe it that way. But I believe, and I wonder what you think of this, that some of our best tools for writing come from our own human and emotional experience. Those are in our toolkit. So when we're building characters, if we want to build a dimensional character, they have to have backstories. They have to have fear.
Yes.
They have to have secrets. They have to be. And so why is it important to create a dimensional character? Because if the reader cares for the character, they will connect with them. And at that moment of connection, like the heart opens and we'll walk with that character for 300 pages. But if we don't connect with the character, then the stakes aren't as high. We're not as invested. And so I'm going to be talking about that, about how we can pull a reader in and invest a reader with what we write.
Oh, that's going to be so good. Listen, another comment here. Sheila says she loved Between Shades of Grey. Talk a little bit about that book.
Oh, thank you. Between Shades of Grey was my first published novel. Why do I say published novel? Well, I had that bad experience when I was 9 years old. But when I came back to writing, I wrote something in an entirely different genre. And why I'm sharing this, because I know you have writers watching and listening, is that my first novel that I tried to get published was in the spirit of Roald Dahl, of James and the Giant Peach, the book that I originally loved. But what I found was that was my, let's say, emulative voice, not my authentic voice. And it was only through the help of critiques and submissions to agents that I found my authentic voice was in historical fiction. And in 5 pages of what would become my first published novel, Between Shades of Grey, which is based on my own extended family's experience of Lithuanians who were arrested and deported to death camps in Siberia. And that seemed like such a heavy and unlikely story to write, especially, for students. But I found my way, and I found my way through conferences and through critiques. And so I'm grateful to that listener for asking that question, because, we take many roads to get to a destination. It certainly took me a lot of windy roads to get to historical fiction.
Well, I salute you, because certainly, it might not be the sexiest, topic that people, people always want the sexy, hot topics, but I salute you that you have done so well in this space. And, certainly Salt to the Sea. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes, definitely. And, I think that initially at the outset, you might think, oh, historical fiction, that isn't sexy, that isn't. But do you know that amidst hardship, amidst war, amidst these terrifying experiences, people were falling desperately in love. And that is sexy, that we can't choose our hardships, but we can choose how to face these hardships. And Salt to the Sea tells the story of the single largest maritime disaster, which people think is the Titanic. It's not. The Titanic had 1,500 people that tragically lost their lives. But near the end of World War II, there was a ship that sank that was carrying over 10,000 people, including over 5,000 teenagers and children. It sank in less than 60 minutes and 9,000 people lost their lives. But what is history hiding from us? Like, what determines how history is preserved and recalled? Why do we not know these stories? And why do we not know about the human beings who experience them?
Yeah. And, as an African American, that certainly is something that we are always talking about. Why in United States history, why is the history interwoven? And I'm not going to go too deep into that, but yes, I definitely hear what you're saying about that. So thank you for those underrepresented stories and realities that are in our history. And so what continues to motivate you as we're wrapping up here? I'm telling you, our time just flew by. What continues to motivate you?
Well, I have to say, your Monday motivation segments. if you haven't watched Charvette's Monday Motivation, please do. But what continues to motivate me is that I know after years of work, motivation leads to inspiration. I'm not just going to show up feeling, oh my goodness, like inspired by this muse. No, I have to put my butt in the chair. And what motivates me is I know that when I do and if I show up, the muse will show up. The muse will eventually show up. That if I put in, the sweat equity and the work, the muse is going to show up, and the creative process will show up. And that can be magical, because sometimes I don't know exactly where I'm going. And then, this creative process takes over and I get there one way or another with the help of readers.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. How can people connect with you online? How can they follow you and all of those things?
Thank you, Charvette, because I'm the worst salesman. This is why we need people like you, platform builders. People, please, I would love to connect with you on Instagram at Ruta Sepetys Author. I'm at Ruta Sepetys on Facebook and Twitter. My website, Ruta Sepetys, or even easier, just go to historyishiding.com, and that will take you to my website. And I would love to connect with you.
All right, there you go. Personal invitation. One last comment. We will slide on in here. Melissa, Salt to the Sea was incredible. Love how you built such intense tension, even as the reader knows what's going to happen. So kudos again there.
Thank you. And please attend the James River Writer Conference, and we'll unpack a bit more of that process.
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, the 19th annual James River Writers Conference, October 8th through the 10th. It is virtual. It is virtual. It is virtual for those that are wondering. And you can jump over to jamesriverwriters.org and you'll get to see Ruta there and attend one of her sessions. Thank you so much for stopping by JRW Talks.
Thanks for having me.
You are welcome. All right, that is going to wrap up another of our amazing interview series. I encourage you to share this out wherever you are watching. Share this out because this was phenomenal, number one. And then number two, you'll get some information and get a feel for what's going to be taking place at the conference. Again, I'm Charvette Mitchell, your host, platform builder, a visionary author, talk radio show host, and all the things. And we'll see you all later on the web. Bye.